Welcome to the CMO Spotlight, and I am here with Pete Boland, who is the Chief Marketing Officer for Kelly. Welcome, Pete.
Thanks, Joe. I'm privileged to be here.
Thank you. Well, we're excited to have this conversation with you, and I thought I would kick it off by just asking you to tell us a little bit about Kelly, the company, and about your role as Chief Marketing Officer there.
Yeah, for sure. As you say, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Kelly, which is a global staffing company. So what that means is we find temporary and full-time talent for great companies, both locally and globally. Some of the, I think actually most of the Fortune 100, we provide great talent for. And the people that we place in those roles go on to do amazing things for those businesses. They invent things, they create things. It's a pretty interesting story. And I lead a team of about 80 skilled marketers in North America, Europe, and a couple in APAC, but mostly in North America and in Europe. It's great fun. Really enjoyed it. Been there for about actually almost 5 years. It's been good. Yeah.
Wow, congratulations. That's a good tenure. And I know you've had an interesting career path that led you to Kelly at this point. I know you started your path at P&G, and you did stints at BlackRock and at Schwab and a couple other places. So I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about your journey that led you to this role.
Yeah, I can. It actually goes back before that. So I'm originally from the UK. As you can probably tell, where I went to university. And then I worked in London for a few years as one of those management trainees for a big international engineering company. And I ended up being the assistant to one of the execs there, a really wonderful boss who sent me to business school in the States, in the US. And from there, I joined P&G, which, as most people know, is a fantastic foundation for a brand marketing career. And then I swapped to Cincinnati for sunny California. I was a foreigner, I was a Brit, so the pull of California was pretty strong certainly in those days. And then I was really fortunate. I gained some great experience building brands at global companies such as Visa and Microsoft and BlackRock and Charles Schwab. And then finally to Kelly. So I feel very, very fortunate in terms of the roles I was able to play and the people I met and the experience I gained. So I certainly feel fortunate to have that experience.
Fantastic. So I'm curious if there's a piece of advice that you either received early in your career or maybe that you wished you received, or even advice you would give somebody that's young in their marketing journey, marketing career, that you thought would be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think there's a couple of things really, and I wish I could have had more advice personally from lots of other much smarter marketers than me than I did. But I did get some great advice in my career, and one of them was actually probably the most important one was don't get stuck in a role that isn't exciting or inspiring for you. And I think that's true in marketing. It's a very exciting, dynamic industry. There's no reason to be stuck in a role that is just not going anywhere. And I had somebody who told me, take chances, try all sorts of different things. And that could be, try the agency side, try the client side, B2B, B2C, local, global, analytics, operations, MarTech. There's so many different roles to try. And, it's all about continuous learning. So, and I realize now I'd much rather hire somebody with a variety of experiences like that rather than somebody who'd spent, a long time in the same role, because this industry changes so much every week, every month, and you need that sort of flexibility really. So that would be number one, I think. Don't get stuck in a role that's exciting or inspiring. You don't have to. I think being also aware of sort of the what phase of your career are you in, and the change in behavior that's needed as you perhaps take on more responsibility, more people, more business, that sort of thing. And it's the key evolution is from being managed to managing others, from doing the work to shaping work essentially. And of course, then it's about hiring, directing, inspiring others. It's that break is really hard for people to manage sometimes. And sometimes you need mentors. I had mentor who helped me make that transition as fast as possible, going from, doing the work to directing, guiding work. It's a massive, massive piece. I think the other thing I would say is that, the last thing I would say is that earlier in my career, I felt I had to work harder than anybody else around me. And that was because I was very conscious of being an outsider. I was an immigrant, right? I came to the States from Europe. And I was at a place like P&G where everyone seemed to be have those Ivy League credentials. And I think that drove me to work harder and longer than anyone else around me. But with hindsight, I could have probably relaxed a bit more. I remember working Sundays and that sort of thing. I probably didn't need to do that. So maybe my advice is, maybe if you're a little bit like me, then relax a bit.
Well, and to your point, maybe that would have made you a better rounded person who would have then had additional skills to bring to your job that you maybe wouldn't have had if you just focused on work.
Yeah, quite true. Quite true.
Yeah. So I believe that everyone has a superpower, and I'm curious what people have told you your superpower is.
Nobody's ever had a superpower.
Or what do you think they would tell you if they were pressed to deliver a superpower?
Yeah, so my family and colleagues would never say I had a superpower. But I was thinking about it, but I'm hopeless at most things, actually. But I think the closest I would come to having a superpower is my ability, which is uncanny, to navigate airports from the car park through to the seat at the highest speed of anybody I know anywhere in the world. I don't know what it is. It's a competitive thing for me to time every time how long it takes. I mean, it's ridiculous, but I'm quite good at it.
Well, I think that's possibly even an analogy for other things in your life, and perhaps you've done a similar thing in terms of a career path and navigating your way through some interesting companies. So perhaps the power of navigation is the larger play here. I don't know.
It could be. I'm a big sailor, and so it hasn't worked out quite yet in terms of navigation still, but I hadn't really thought about that. Yeah.
So I'm curious, are there some values that you want to demonstrate as a leader, or are there values that you demand in your team? You mentioned your team's, roughly 80 people around the globe. Are there certain values you demand in them?
Well, I think there's the values hopefully I stand for. And you generally want a culture that reflects that, I think. So, and they're probably, you'd have to ask my team if they felt the same when I say this, but the values for me that are super critical are just the basic things about integrity and fairness and empathy. I mean, those are basic human values that are critical if you want to create a team. There's plenty of other values, but for me, those are the most important. And especially in your role, right? When you're the leader of decent sized organization, you're under scrutiny, either consciously or unconsciously all the time. And it's hard, to play those roles. So for me, it's easy. Integrity, fairness, empathy, the most important.
Great. I love those.
Also, say I'm a very positive person by nature. So I always trying to inject some energy and excitement into what we do, and big doses of humor as well. So yeah.
I love it. I love it. In terms of finding inspiration, either for yourself or inspiration for your team, where do you look to get inspiration?
Well, I hope that most people get inspiration from their personal lives, right? Their families, what they do outside. Right. And for me, I'm very much about family first, personal life first. Working to live rather than living to work. And I think that provides a really important foundation for energy and inspiration people bring to the working side of their lives. But beyond that, hopefully in my team, people find some inspiration from personal growth and making things happen. So we're constantly looking for celebrate wins. And marketing's hard, work is hard, right? So sometimes it's good to just see those individual small wins that you make every week that adds up to something else. And my job of senior marketing leaders is try and design an atmosphere, an environment where skilled marketers can do their best work and then feel really good about that. So a culture of celebrating wins is just part of that for me.
I love that.
Hopefully that's inspiring. Yeah.
In terms of So setup exists to connect marketers together, empowering human connections, but particularly focused on, in many cases, matching brands and marketing agencies together. So we live kind of in that space between, we're not an agency, we're not on the client side, but we do live in that space in between. I'm curious, just generally, how do you work with marketing agencies at Kelly or even in a previous life?
Pretty conventionally, I think, using creative agencies and now more and more performance marketing partners. So, creative agencies that do the certainly media buying, creative development, creative strategy, and then performance marketing to really help us understand what tools we can be using, and also do the hard work in terms of helping us understand the data that we're getting from all over and putting it into a format that we can then take action against. And so I think that hasn't changed. I don't see it changing. I have some partners. I've learned so much from those kinds of partners over the career, perhaps the most of anything I've ever learned.
Are there certain functions that you feel are crucial to keep in-house and that you would rarely outsource to an external partner, or vice versa? Are there certain functions that you really feel strongly getting an outside perspective is crucial?
Yeah, I think your point, getting outside perspective, is crucial because you just have different eyes when it comes to creative development and certainly media buying, those sorts of things. I think in-house, you want to keep strategic decision-making in-house because you need to be experts at that. That shouldn't be the job of your partners. And that kind of decision-maker, they can help you with thinking, but decision-making strategically is right. But I always look to the outside for creative strategy. Tell us how we should communicate this idea. We think this way, but tell us from your point of view how we can bring it to life, and that always results in a better outcome, basically.
So to that point, it sounds like you would prefer agency support that doesn't just work in the staffing business, where they only have the perspective of staffing, and you'd rather have a broader set of experiences from your external partners?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't think of anything worse than having, not having that outside perspective. Because at the end of the day, we're talking to consumers here, whether they are prospective clients we want to bring on board or whether they are job seekers. You have to have the mindset of the fact these are consumers. So you have to have experts in talking to consumers because their next task might be buying a car, ordering from Amazon, that sort of thing. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, you're right that we as humans have been trained by the tools and technologies in our environment to think about certain things in certain ways. For example, Amazon has trained us that the shopping cart goes at the top right of a web page. And if you were to buy something via e-commerce from anybody else, if they don't put the shopping cart at the top right, you're not going to find it, right?
That's so right. Yeah.
And so I think to your point, we live in a world where we're both consumers and business people and other things too. But you're right that we need to take into account the humanity of our customers and of our people and of our staff and job seekers and everybody else like that.
Right.
So I'm curious, often as marketers, we're working with folks who are not marketing experts, who don't live and breathe marketing all day, every day. So I'm curious, how do you demonstrate the value of marketing to those that you work with who are not marketers by trade?
It's simple. Always data, just always performance data, showing what marketing revenue and profitability is being driven from marketing. So that's often quite hard to make the direct connection. That's the only way. There's nothing else. To my mind, nothing else matters.
Yeah. Well, it's tougher with even some soft metrics or whatever, brand metrics and social media metrics and things like that they are measurements, but they're not the same as ROI based measurements. So
yeah, it's true. I mean, I can show brand tracking data. I could talk to business leaders in my company about, hey, our brand is up 10 points on this, and we are number one in PR. And they'll nod their heads, and it's sort of, well, that's nice. but only when you show them the data do they about acquisition data, they then start leaning in and saying, what if we gave you a little bit more money? Could you continue that campaign? So that's that's what really makes it work.
I love it. So I'm curious if there's a campaign or program that you've run either at Kelly or even in a previous life that taught you a great deal, either because it was a miserable failure and it taught you something you really needed to learn, or it was a big success and it's something you might want to emulate again in the future.
That's a great question, and I think like most marketers, I've had my share of miserable failures that we instantly forget about.
Right.
You move on. I think I've learned from each one. I think more from the campaign. I've learned more from my boss at the time or agency creative or strategy leads about how to make work that has an impact rather than any particular campaign. So, for example, I learned from people about being really clear about the argument that your campaign is making, whose mind is it trying to change, and how is it crystal clear in every execution? Will somebody get it the first time they're exposed to it? And that's something that it seems obvious, but that can get lost when in the middle of creating 5 bits of creative. I've learned from others to really sweat the details, which I'm not great at. Sometimes at excruciating levels. For example, I had a boss who had this weird obsession about the brand of tie or shoes on the OCP, the on-camera principle, or even the people of background on that. And it was excessive, but I understood why he thought it was important to get every detail right. So and the last thing I'd say I've learned is that sometimes creative doesn't always jump, the right idea doesn't always jump out at you. You go to those agency, books or slideshows, you're waiting for the one that's going to jump out at you because it's going to be the winning campaign. But that doesn't always happen.
Right.
I remember Crispin Porter Boguski shared with me their idea, Own Your Tomorrow, which is now Charles Schwab's 10-year long-running tagline.
Yeah, right.
I heard it, I thought, okay, that's a bit mundane, a bit obvious, really. But that's its strength. It was simple and clear, and 10 years later, they're still using it everywhere. So I've learned a few things.
I like that, because I do think it's easier to write a book about it than it is to write a headline. In some ways, the distillation of the idea to resonate with your target audience in a very simple and clear way, it's more challenging to get to that than it is to just blather on about why you are good or not so good or all those things.
You're quite right. Yeah.
All right. So I thought we'd switch gears and ask some questions just for fun. The first is there a band or a movie or a sports team or a book or a quote that really inspires you? And what is it about that particular item that inspires you?
I'm going to go to a classically boring Shakespeare quote, because I heard it in my school days in England years ago and I've never lost it, which is, it goes like this: your doubts are traitors, and they make you lose the good you oft might win in fearing to attempt. So I think it's doubts are traitors, they make us lose the good we oft might win in fearing to attempt. Which has stayed with me for years. I'm not sure I practiced it, but I do genuinely think about that quite a lot. So it's not quite the Clash or anything like that, but
no, that's okay.
It's real.
You could have said know your rights, but that's okay. That's a whole nother. You mentioned family being inspiring to you, but I'm curious if there's anything outside of family that really inspires you, hobbies or passions or things like that.
Yeah. I mean, family is number one for me, as it is for most people, I would think. But I really enjoy sailboat racing, and I love it for its intensity, teamwork, competitive edge, and it's a little bit like marketing. It's extremely complex and absorbing. Even before you get on the water for a race, you have to think through pre-start strategy and tactics. And then once you're on the waters, all the things that happen that mess everything up, the changing winds, tides, competitors, all sorts of things. And so it's very complex and absorbing. And there's a ton of satisfaction also of leading a team. It's my boat, so I lead a team. And many of, the people on that team, the crew, most of them are far more experienced than me, more skilled than me. But the responsibility to make decisions rests on me. And that, and you know that statistically, half of those decisions you make about where to go in a sailboat race are generally wrong. So it's very challenging and stressful. And there's physical work, and sometimes it's cold and you're tired and you're beating up San Francisco Bay. But then, like probably all sports, we all know that moment when you do quite well makes it all worthwhile. So that's what I do. That's my passion outside work.
Well, and I'm going to make a guess that your ability to navigate airports rapidly and efficiently also plays itself out on the sailboat in terms of, and I don't mean just literally navigating the water, but also navigating those relationships with, the team and that kind of thing.
I wish it did.
Well, I want to thank you so much. Pete Boland is the Chief Marketing Officer of Kelly, which is one of the largest staffing companies in the world. So thank you so much for your time, Pete.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a great pleasure.